Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Dead or Alive for the Japanese Sega Saturn. Now this game was released in 1997, which was just about a year after the arcade version. And as you can see there's Li Fang, Kasumi, and Tina. It shows their eyes on the front, similar to the PlayStation cover, which I'll be covering soon. But the PlayStation cover, of course, had the white background in the back. And one thing I always thought was cool about these Japanese Sega Saturn games, I don't know if you can see this all too well, but right on the spine here, the Japanese on one side, and then it's purely written in English on the other side, which is very nice, especially if you're importing these, so you can easily tell, well, other than the fact the big logo on the top, what game you're looking at. But this was actually the only direct port of the arcade version. And this was never released in North America or Europe, so yeah, you'd only be able to import it. And of course, later on it was released on the Dead or Alive Ultimate, which I will show you a little bit later on in the video. But as you can see, I already have my disc right in the system. Just going to close it up, turn it on, and let's take a look. Okay, there's the Sega logo that displays before every Sega Saturn game, and then it's going to say that the system is coming up, and of course it tells us just in a second here that it was presented by Tecmo. And of course next, the True Motion is the formatted video that plays the intro, and here's your intro video. Take a look at this. Okay, well that was the intro to the game. It basically shows off a lot of the characters in like their CG fashion. And let's get right into this. As you can see, the 8 characters from the arcade version return, along with playable Rido, once you beat the game with all 8 characters. Once, at least, and then you get Rido. He has 2 costumes. I'm going to be using the second costume. And of course you'll notice, since this is a Japanese game, all the information and vital stats about your characters were all in Japanese. And you should be able to notice right away that the graphics, they do look good considering this was a port to the Sega Saturn. But if you look at the backgrounds very closely, you'll quickly notice that they're not the same 3D rendered brethren that were in the arcade. And as I had mentioned earlier, this came out in 1997. To be exact, it was October 9th of 1997 in Japan. And the move that I just had Rido do there is a move that Jan Lee can do as well. That's one thing I have to say about Rido. He has like a lot of different characters' moves, like basically all put into one character, so it's like more or less a combination. And before every match it shows like the character portrait like that. And of course, if you had seen this during my arcade playthrough video, this stage here, the big difference is that in the arcade version there was that big canopy over the top, whereas in this version any of the 3D objects that would have been up in the air are not there because they just simply couldn't be rendered by the Sega Saturn. And of course, just like any stage in this game, all the backgrounds are more or less black since they can't do the 3D rendered effect since the system didn't have enough power. But as I said, considering the power of the Sega Saturn, the character models do look really good. They're using like a texture mapping type system, which means basically you have a character model and then they map the textures onto it, which gives it a pretty nice sharp look. And now here at Hayabusa's stage, the big thing a lot of people will notice is that the bridge isn't moving back and forth on top of the two players. If you look very closely during some of the win things, you'll notice that the bridge is actually shown up in the air. Like if you look right there during the replay, the bridge is actually part of the top background instead of being a free-floating polygonal thing with made of polygons. So at least they still included it, but it's just basically part of the ceiling more or less. And I like it how they actually were able to get the danger zone to look halfway decent. It's not fully with the polygons, it's just kind of texture tricks that make it look like it's still pulsing like it did in the arcade. But as you'll see when I next do the PlayStation version, they didn't take nearly as much time as they did with this one. And now we have the highway here with Jan Lee. This is basically the same stage, as I'd mentioned, the same effects as before. And actually, something I'd mentioned in the arcade video was actually wrong. In this game, you actually still can ring out your opponents. They just took that out when it came to the PlayStation and ZN versions of Dead or Alive, because I guess they figured it really didn't come into play much because you would kill your character in the danger zone and you really wouldn't need the ring out as well. And I still like how the texturing looks like in the characters. And if you notice in the back there still is the women's pro wrestling thing with Tina Armstrong on it. But the texturing of the characters' costumes definitely looks really cool. And as I just mentioned earlier, you'll see Jan Lee was trying to do that headlock move, which I'm about to show him how to do it. But he didn't get the knock your head on the floor part of it done. I just thought that was kind of funny that he tried to do it, he didn't finish the move, and then I finished the move to slam his face on the ground. And that's the only thing I think is a little weird about Raito in this game, is he only says one phrase when he wins matches, no matter what, no matter which match you're ending, be it the first one, the last one, the middle one. I don't know if I mentioned it already, but the intro that you had seen earlier, normally it would be squared off into like a little box, but I've actually used my editing software and zoomed in as close as I could to make it look a little bit more filling the screen. It might not look that great. I think it's a little bit, I'd say, upscaled-ish in the Xbox version, but that's just because they had a better video codec. I doubt it looks all that much better, honestly. Still the same good intro with the CG characters. And that's another thing I didn't like about the original Dead or Alive is both Jan Lee and Tina's stages look very similar. They're both just more or less a road, maybe a different stretch of road, but they really didn't look as unique as they did in later games, in my opinion. And here's back to the Bayman stage, very similar to the arcade version. Except I believe in the arcade version, some of the scaffolding was hanging a little bit over, rendered in polygons. But of course, this version, you just don't see that. And the one thing I mentioned in the arcade video that you don't see here is where you would see that readout in the background and the numbers would be moving. That's been taken out. But the fans still spin, which is kind of nice considering most of the backgrounds don't really move at all. So it's nice to see a little feature here. And there Bayman actually beat me. I think somewhere in this footage you actually get to see that little readout I was telling you about, but sadly, as I said, the numbers are now missing, because it's just going to be blank readouts, no numbers at all, not even like stationary ones. And honestly, I was surprised I did so well in this gameplay, because Normally, I would at least lose to one person, but it's takes a little practice, honestly, considering I had been out of Dead or Alive, playing the original Dead or Alive for a while here. Usually it's Genfu that beats me the most of any character. Although then again, if I play as Genfu in this game, I usually get beaten by a lot of people. And it's good to see they were able to texture a lot of like the environmental details and everything nicely. Like you can see the ground here, the stones still look pretty good. One big feature you'll notice as compared to the arcade version is those banners that were hanging down with the kanji characters on them no longer wave in the wind like they did in the arcade version. They're just kind of stationary objects. Which, honestly, I wonder if they possibly could have done that, just like they did the Fan Blades and Bayman stage, but I guess they just figured, what's the point? And now we're going to be fighting Kasumi, and of course, as I'd mentioned in length in the arcade video, you're still in the same danger zone arena as you were, but as you can see, it does not move at all as it did in the arcade version. And I thought that was a nice little feature that it actually would move. But just like with everything else I had mentioned that was different in the stages, the Sega Saturn just doesn't have the horsepower to make it a fully animated moving. I just think it's cool enough that they were able to pull off the bitmap tricks to have the backgrounds in the back, kind of like Virtua Fighter. And you'll notice this stage moves a little too, because those lights in the background move up and down like that. So, it's just a nice little feature that they added to the stage to make it look a little bit more or less static than it really is, considering it's pretty static. Winner! And now that takes care of Kasumi. Now, I'll point out here, you'll notice if you look at the time really close, it was pretty low before, but now it's like 5 minutes. I had lost about 3 times to Rido, so I just cut those out because it made the video a little bit too long. But as I'd mentioned in the Dead or Alive arcade version video with Kasumi, I can honestly say I'm horrible at mirror matches. Because it always turns out that the AI can exploit the character's moves a lot better than I can, because you know it's the AI, it kind of knows how to play the game a little bit better than I have, because it's kind of made to do that. So any of the crazy moves that are like really hard to do, they just can pull them off without having to do all kinds of crazy contortions with your fingers. But this was actually one good run through where I was actually to beat him pretty quickly. And I definitely liked it how the intro was still there, where it struck the lightning and then Rido appears. That the Sega Saturn and arcade are the only versions to where this is visible. I definitely like this enter your name screen where you're actually just running around the letters, hitting the button to do them. Then of course when you get 3 it goes to end, and if you hit end, your character just falls over and just dies on the big Dead or Alive logo there. And of course I'm going to show you the full credit sequence here, which in the beginning here you're going to just see the stills of the different characters coming on, which is some nice artwork, and I definitely like that loading screen that you saw briefly. I believe that also shows when you like go in and out of training mode, which is not too bad considering there isn't too much loading in this version of Dead or Alive, which I definitely love to see. I know everyone would agree with that. Loading time is never all that fun. But yeah, once it shows these characters here, you're going to see the, as I'd mentioned in the arcade video, the intro of the arcade video is more or less remade in the ending here as CG, since they couldn't actually render in real time. Although then again, I don't see why not, but I guess they didn't want to have to sequence the ending. And I'm going to let you take a look at this ending really quick, and I will get back to you when we take a look at the Xbox version in just a couple minutes. Okay, the Sega Saturn port of Dead or Alive was definitely a great version for the time, and of course the only way you could possibly get Dead or Alive 1 in your home. But now we're going to take a quick look at the Dead or Alive Ultimate version of Dead or Alive 1, which came in this nice little case here. Get that out of the way, and see. Nice little case here. There's Tina, there's Li Fang, just like on the Japanese Saturn cover, and on the back here is Kasumi. Disc would normally be there, but I've already put it in the console. And there's the manual, along with the 2 character cards. I got Tina and Li Fang with this copy. I've already taken the liberty to put the game in the system, just to save a little bit of time here. Just gotta press the power button. Xbox comes right up. And then once the little Microsoft logo pops up on there, it's very similar to the Sega Saturn version where the Dead or Alive system comes right up. Just like that. And let's take a look. Okay, it says Tecmo Presents, then it would just go into intro, just like the Sega Saturn version. But since it's the exact same intro and there really isn't anything about it except it's like a little bit upscaled-ish, we're just gonna cut right through that, and you'll see it's a different title screen. It says Dead or Alive 1 Ultimate. It's black instead of being white. And the only different option we'll have here is the DOA Online feature with the online. And of course, I didn't mention this in the other video, everyone has their 3 basic costumes from the arcade version, Raito having 2. And then there's all these costumes at the end with the question marks, exclamation points, and the stars, which are the bonus costumes you unlock from playing it every time. And the costume I'm going to play is one of Li Fang's special costumes, if you will. You'll see in just a minute here. And if you didn't notice already, but all the actual vital stats there were in English instead of being in Japanese, which comes with the territory. And these are a bit of a strange costume, if you ask me. Li Fang has her string bikinis here, which were only in the Sega Saturn and Xbox versions. And if you look at this, it looks almost identical to the Sega Saturn version, except for I think it plays in a slightly higher resolution, and everything is just a little sharper, because they basically took all the assets from the Sega Saturn version and applied a nice smoothing filter, so everything just looks a lot nicer. And the thing that I don't like about this version of the game is, with the power of the Xbox, I see no reason why they couldn't have simply ported the arcade version over to the Xbox. That would have been Dead or Alive 1 Ultimate. This honestly really isn't. It's just a port of the Sega Saturn version, but I guess it's one of those things. If you didn't have the Sega Saturn version, this just definitely seems different and maybe even better, if you will, since there are a few costumes here and there which weren't in the PlayStation version, or even the Plus version. But it carries all the same flaws, the missing geometry, like all the stuff in the ceiling. Like in this stage we'll see it's still missing the bridge, and it still uses the same old background graphics, which I didn't notice that when I was playing it earlier, but it has the lightning in the background here, which, as I mentioned in the Sega Saturn part of this video, just makes it look a little bit more animated and not as flat. But I kind of think this is just kind of a poor effort on their part, where they just ported the game instead of doing much work. I guess all the work went into Dead or Alive 2 Ultimate, which was totally upscaled using the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball engine and the same type of models from that game. So I guess they really didn't have much left to redo this game, or even port the arcade version, which would have been nice. And you'll notice the bikini strings and everything bounce just like all the other stuff. And you'll notice the horribly bad bouncing breast in this game. Well, that's Dead or Alive 1 for the Sega Saturn and Xbox. Definitely a great game, and I very highly recommend it to everybody who likes these kind of games and Dead or Alive games. And I will see you in my next video, where we will look at the last 2 versions of Dead or Alive. See you later.